So I want to welcome you to the Icon Solution Series session, Solving for Mental Health in Cancer Care Next Steps. Wanted to remind you about how we got here exactly and how exciting it is really to be here. Back in October, Mark Garza, who some of you will see later, moderated a session during Icon Summit in October around mental health and cancer care. And the output of that session was really robust and led us to these next steps. So that's how we got here. Today is an opportunity for your voice, your ideas, your thoughts to really be a part of the future for mental health in cancer care. And we're really honored to have you here. Before we dive in, I want to introduce to you Greg Lee. He is a 3-time cancer survivor. He's a cancer caregiver, and he's also CEO and president of Livestrong. Greg, you've got the virtual floor.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. First of all, a welcome to all of y'all for joining in this morning. We really appreciate your participation. For almost 25 years, literally 25 years, Livestrong has been here to serve and support and reach almost 94 million people around the globe and help people save in excess of $77 million in healthcare and related costs. That is not all possible without people like you that partner with us, that help us, and that support us in trying to find new solutions to solve the practical problems that cancer constituents and caregivers face every single day. This is particularly important and special for us today because we're stepping outside what many people might say is the traditional role of a cancer charity, which is fighting the disease and the chemistry and the biology. For many of you who are very familiar with Livestrong, we've all been about putting the patient at the center of this topic and the center of this problem. And it's been more about a holistic approach. We're not as much about the science and the biology and the chemistry because there's tons of other people who are really specialized and have the expertise in that area. But we're about the person who has the disease and how do they cope with things and how do they deal with things. That may be insurance related issues. It may be understanding what the doctor, nurse, or others are saying. And today's topic is really about the mental health aspects of that. Because we all know, especially for those of us who have gone through this scenario or helped others go through this scenario, the mental health and the emotional support side of a chronic disease that literally lasts the rest of your life is a big component. I'm excited today to have Michael join us and the other panelists really help us dive in to find new solutions to help us better understand the mental health aspects of this horrible disease and identify solutions that will make it better for everyone. Thanks again for joining us this morning. I'm looking forward to the dialogue and our learnings. Thanks again. And from Austin, Texas, we really appreciate your engagement. Let's make it a great morning and let's have a great day. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Greg. So as we begin today, I want to introduce to you Michael Moskowitz. He is the CEO of the behavioral health company ABZ Labs. He's a serial entrepreneur who created Bureau of Trade that was acquired by eBay. He's worked with the Founder Collective, with Foundation Capital, and was the first ever entrepreneurship fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. He is joining us today from Hamburg, Germany, where he is currently a visiting scholar and senior advisor at the New Institute. This is the short version of Michael's bio. He's a fascinating man, and we're very honored to have you here today. Thank you for making this possible. Michael, the virtual floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely intro. You'll have to forgive me if I seem a little bit out of sorts. It's not that my reality is blurry. That's simply a tech feature here, but it has been a bewildering and beguiling 12 months here in Germany. The only way that I can even begin to characterize it, borrowing a page from another famous Texans playbook, Wes Anderson, there's a scene in the 1999 cult classic Rushmore where Harold Bloom had a unsuccessful love affair with a teacher at the school and he encounters his protege in the elevator. And he's looking disheveled and haggard, and he empties a vodka shooter into a beer can, finishes it, stuffs it between bed linens, lights 2 cigarettes. And when the kid asks, "How you doing, man?" He Bill Murray's character replies, "I've been a little lonely lately." And I think it's fair to assume that most of us have been more than just a little lonely lately. What I discovered a couple of months ago was that these symptoms don't fit or conventionally cohere to standard characterizations of disquietude or anxiety or depression. It's meeting some of the clinical criteria that behavioral specialists and veterinarians typically witness among animals held in captivity. It's called zoochosis. That might sound like a Radiohead album that has not yet been released, but these are the conditions that prevail among animals kept in restrictive settings against their will, labs, libraries, zoos. I'm sorry, nobody keeps their animals in libraries. I mean labs, zoos, and other restrictive settings. I don't know what you're doing if you're keeping a tiger in a library, but it results in pathological rocking, sometimes self-mutilation, enhanced scrutiny of other species, and leads to longitudinal health and psychological effects of physical and psychological expressions. And to some degree, we're witnessing that sort of en masse in the States and even in parts of Europe. The good news is it's not all bad news. It just suggests that we're no different than animals. We need people. We need room to roam. We need intimacy. And those are very, very difficult impediments to overcome during COVID. But what we specialize in as a company is provisions of digital nutrition. What we discovered, beginning during my tenure at Harvard, and certainly in the 4 unequivocally focused, determined last 4 years with which we've been pursuing this venture, is that there's a mountain of scientific literature that strongly correlates specific content types with into specific mood governing neurotransmitters in your brain. Everybody, I'm sure by now, knows that Facebook has been exploiting dopaminergic pathways since its birth. That's fine. But it turns out that specific types of digital assets can also trigger the release of oxytocin, the bonding and love molecule that you experience when you're making love to a partner, or being kind to a child, or even petting your dog or cat. And it's released in both of you in that case. We can do the same thing with endorphins for energy. We can do the same thing with testosterone for mood and aging support or stewardship. You can do the same thing with acetylcholine for focus. And this can it's not just the stuff of theory or science fiction. We've proven both in clinical and in non-clinical settings that this has real biostatistician verified evidence of impact, which is pretty significant. And this is true even among some of the world's most extreme users in the Air Force, with whom we partnered for the last 2 years. But digital nutrition is not yet a household term, right? It took 40 years of public health advocacy to make healthy food familiar to people across the US. We're not nearly there yet with provisions of digital nutrition, meaning specific administration, whether it's consumed on your own terms or fed to you opportunistically by some of the platforms on which you depend, to use digital materials to guide, influence, and elevate the way that you feel over time. It's not going to come as any surprise to people on this call that there are movies that can make you feel happy. There are movies that make you feel sad. There's music that can help you feel focused. There's music that can help you feel energized. This is just a methodologically defensible way of doing it in a manner that can prove accretive to emotional resilience. Why do I think this is of interest to people suffering from cancer? Well, I'm reminded of a quote from Amos Tversky. He was Danny Kahneman's partner. He was not, unfortunately, the recipient of the Nobel Prize in economics because they do not award it to those that have passed. And when he was struggling with his own cancer, he said, and this is very dry, characteristically Israeli wit, he says, "When I got sick, I used to think that I was dying. But now that I'm actually dying, I mostly feel fine." Well, having gone through this with several close friends who lost their battle to cancer, they mostly did not feel fine. They had a much harder time. And the behavioral challenges imposed by cancer aren't always easy to combat. Now, the good news is, although clinicians and clergy don't often see the world eye to eye on almost any subject, there is generally a consensus about the 5 fundamental factors undergirding human health, happiness, and prosperity. And they are, this shouldn't come as any surprise, diet, sleep, exercise, interpersonal relationships, and vocation. Those latter 2 are exceedingly difficult to address or maintain during COVID. But in our view, there's now, as a function of the success of tech and the fact that we spend more than 12 hours a day on average consuming these materials, a 6th critical pillar, and that's digital nutrition. It's how can the assets or materials to which we're exposed daily enrich our lives as opposed to erode emotional resilience? How can they improve the way that they feel as opposed to impairing outcomes? And if you're treating the whole patient, this has to prove a critical piece. So for healthcare systems, There's a role that predictive analytics will play based on or informed by digital nutrition. And for anyone's interested, we're happy to send you a Chrome-based plugin so you can have X-ray vision when you're scanning YouTube to see what is the digital nutrition profile of this show, of this channel, of this film. There's a role for safety and transparency. Show me, tell me, with the same degree of consistency and regularity that I've come to expect of food or beverages or even mattresses in the US which have a label. What is in this content I'm consuming? This is not just important for content moderators on Facebook, or even for teens that are newly becoming accustomed to having new platforms where they can communicate with one another. It's important everywhere. I can reference later a Ronnie Chang joke, where he said, this is one of the former news correspondents on Daily Show. He's like, someday we're gonna say, you used to use the internet indoors? You used to let the children use the internet? Well, we're not quite there yet. And the point is not to stoke up people's fear or to accelerate the stigma or like the newly broadening consensus around the danger of tech. It's to say that one, food is neither good nor bad. It depends on when you eat, how much, and what you consume. Technology is no different. It also, in my estimation, appears that healthcare and entertainment are on a bit of a collision course. 10 years ago, it was very common for content companies like eBay to say, forgive me, commerce companies, eBay's a commerce company, to say, boy, we wish we were in the content business, to keep people coming back with a greater cycle of regularity. And a lot of the publishers in that era were saying, boy, we wish we were a commerce company. We wish we had things we could sell. Well, in an eerily similar vein, entertainment businesses are becoming wise to this approach. And healthcare companies want to figure out other ways in which they can play a relevant role in people's lives without making unreasonable demands in terms of behavior change. It's hard to adopt a meditation practice. It's hard to get up off the couch. How can we blend or borrow elements of the best of both to improve the recovery prospects for people that are in treatment, and even to take greater preventative measures, not around smoking cessation necessarily, but even before people are beginning to witness or the onset of organic disease, what can we do to improve the quality of lives to reduce the incidence of cancer? And now, because we're 1 minute left, for inpatient care, if anyone's seen Ad Astra with Brad Pitt, it's sort of like Apocalypse Now set in space, or Apocalypse Now Redux. There are these recovery rooms, these seductive, plangent sounds that are circulating around and pleasant videos on the wall. Well, that's tomorrow's tech today. I mean, that's everything that we've been doing for the last accumulated 48 months. And the good news is if you have or are part of a healthcare system, these are very, very easy experiences to set up in existing facilities. You don't have to spend $200,000 building a new office or even $20,000 on biofeedback equipment. You can do this as sort of a $20 workaround. For outpatient care, our view is that proprietary molecules like prescription meds have to work in concert with therapeutic interventions administered by an expert, plus as the third leg of the stool, apps that can track all of the other vicissitudes in your emotional landscape during hours that you're not commonly being seen by a doctor. So if you're curious, you should take a look at the new app we're releasing later this month called Rise. And then there's sort of the future landscape, and I can sort of end there, which is one, diffusers. If you look at people's conventional countertops, I would predict that you'll see a toothbrush, motorized or otherwise, maybe some perfume, some version of aerosolized air cleaner. Well, it's actually sort of a competitive, it's a far less competitive field than the cereal aisle where you have 250 brands. And so if we could, using some of the patents that we've already submitted, patents, and the designs that we've already developed, to have a geoproximate mood stabilizer aerosolized in a bath or bedroom, beginning with over-the-counter solutions and eventually matriculating into the realm of pharma where mood stabilizers can be released to increase the rate of drug adherence. That's pretty powerful. And if you're on a borrowed page from sort of the cultural playbook of somebody like, and I know this is a dated reference, but Nelly, only because he wore that Band-Aid conspicuously on his face, there's a version of mood stabilizers available over the counter, either produced by a Nike or by a Livestrong that can be worn on the neck very conspicuously, or on the arm that can be very tightly tailored to support your idealized mood state around focus or connection or energy or pleasure seeking and rewards. And so there's the future landscape, there's the currently addressable market. If anyone is curious, I can circulate around some version of this along with hyperlinks. And that's it. I think I'm under, that's 15 minutes flat, 15.